you don't need a whole lot of money to be investing in NDIS at all. Because the properties that we have come with the lease, they're with significant NDIS providers that the financiers know. It's a secure lease as far as they're concerned. So they're not really too worried about who's buying it. Okay.
Okay.
Because it comes with a 10-year, 20-year, up to a 40-year lease. They've done plenty of these properties through us before. They know people are getting money. They know they're making their repayments. But having said that, don't ask me, because that's a mortgage broker question, and that's the reason why everybody that we start talking to fills in a fact find, assets and liabilities form to work out, before we start talking about properties with them, to work out what they can afford and just make sure that that they will be able to purchase something. But people with $60,000 worth of income have bought NDIS properties from us before, and I don't see any reason why they wouldn't be able to do that again. And there's plenty of self-employed people with about zero income that are, I shouldn't say plenty, but there's a couple with not much, like $20-something thousand taxable income that have bought NDIS properties before. Contracts, no big deal, but that's definitely a mortgage broker question. Does that answer that question?
That makes it clear.
There's other limitations as to how old they are too, which might come into play, and how long they've got to pay back the loan. So there's multiple factors that are going to come into play. But yeah, mortgage broker question, not really an issue because we get a lease from day one. So I've only seen one person's finance get declined, and that's because he was nearly 75, couldn't work forever, and that didn't go through. Apart from credit score is going to come and play a part as well. So people actually don't need good credit, but they got to have not bad credit either to get through. So yeah, the focus is not really on the buyer. The focus is on the lease, who's leasing it, which that's the advantage of dealing with us, because we've got a couple of the biggest NDIS providers in Australia that are giving us the lease. There's two Deans in, and it says that you're still connecting to audio. So I'm not 100% sure that you can hear me, or that I'll be able to hear you, but feel free to ask a question as well. And Frank, do you have any burning questions to get off your chest before we started the presentation as well?
No, sorry, I'm all good at the moment.
All right. Yep. Well, feel free to chime in.
Yep, sure.
As
Thanks.
well. Should you have any? There's quite a few people, I shouldn't say, there's a couple of people that have seen the presentation before, and so that's typically why we ask the questions up front, because we don't make everybody sit through another half an hour of looking at me to ask their questions. So that's why it's a little bit around the wrong way of what a normal presentation would be. But that's also a bit like NDIS. NDIS is 180 degrees different to a normal everyday investment property purchase as well. Because with us, we actually start by having a lease in place before we'll even show you a property, talk about a property, which means that we've done a whole lot of work, or the NDIS providers, or the SDA provider, or the SIL provider has gone and done a whole lot of work. They've secured somebody that wants to move into a house in that particular area, which is also a very good point, that I personally don't care where you want to invest. and it's basically irrelevant as well. You need to invest where a participant wants to live, all right? So you'll get a few choices of areas, but all those areas that we can suggest to you do have participants waiting. And it's irrelevant where you want to invest because this is not like the good old days of purchasing property and then sitting there waiting for capital growth for us to make our money. We're actually manufacturing our capital growth in the first year or so, and I can touch on that and prove that as well, which means that once you've got one of these things up and running, you'll be able to, we expect, in a year or maybe after 2 years when you've done some tax returns, then you can come and buy another one because of the immediate capital growth that we're getting out of these things and have been getting out of them. Alrighty. Here is a add-on to Devang's question. I just spent 5 minutes working out how much money people would need to purchase an investment property because a lot of people just assumed that it was going to take a lot of money to purchase. So let me just share the screen and I'll give you an example of where to go. Let me share, sorry. An example of property that's available. Alrighty, so we have a house here, just over $700,000. It will take 2 participants, and if we can buy a 2-participant house, we would, because most of the NDIS providers will only put 2 participants into a house anyway. So the NDIS and the SIL providers don't really care too much about you as an investor. They are focused on looking after a person with a disability. So in a lot of cases, there's no point buying a house that can fit 3 participants. At some stage, it will probably become mandatory because you lazy investors are not buying enough houses to cope with the demand. So the NDIS has given people a heads up that they want houses for 3 participants built because it's a lot easier just to build an existing bedroom while we're building something than it is to go and build 2. To build 3 2-bedroom houses. It's a lot easier to build it's a lot easier to build 2 3-bedroom houses than it is to go and build 3 2-bedroom houses. I got that around the wrong way, but anyway, you get the idea. With a total of 6 bedrooms. So we're definitely being encouraged. One of the NDIS providers will not lease a 2-bedroom house that's sold after 1st of July. So obviously what that means to the investors is the cost is going up, because if it's 3 bedrooms, it's going to cost you more. It's a bigger house, so it's probably going to need a bigger block of land as well. So the lands will probably be more expensive depending on where we are, and the build cost will obviously be more expensive as well. So that's another way of us telling you to hurry up. And there's many reasons why you should be hurrying up. The most obvious one is that you'd be missing out on $3,000 a week if you didn't have it. But the build prices always go up, land prices go up. And once a participant's in a house, he's not going to move. So you need to be in there and giving that house to rent as soon as you possibly can, because there's only a limited supply of participants in any particular area. And then, of course, there's a limited supply of people to look after them, the carers, and all the other services that are required. So entry level, maybe if somebody's earning 60 grand a year, well, now they can add $163,000 to their income. So that's going to serve us quite well. And we've had customers that have not been able to afford a $400,000 house, but they can afford or apartment, obviously these days, but they can afford a $850,000 NDIS house because of the income and the servicing. Further answered Devang's question. So this is a $700,000 property. The whole point of these things is to make them look like a normal everyday investment property. We like building them out in regional areas because there's a lot less competition for us. And of course, you as the owner, so that you'll get tenants in there. And we can book out the builders because a lot of the builders in the regional areas, they're not going to build a couple of hundred houses a year. They're only going to be building in the dozens or so. So that means we've blocked your competition from building other houses in there and giving the participants much choice. Look at how much it will cost to buy this thing. Land, $285,000. And of course, obviously buying in a regional area, the land's cheaper. The building costs are always about the same. And therefore, your returns are going to be greater. In some places in Sydney, we can spend $1.5 million on a block of land and still be getting, instead of $163,000, maybe we get $180,000 in rent. So, if you want to buy in Sydney, well, we know there's a demand, but if you just want to make money and maximize your returns as an investor, then we don't worry too much about that area, as long as we've got the lease, as long as we've got the participants. So $185,000 worth of land, 10% deposit on the land, $28,000 and a bit. We've got to pay stamp duty, which is just over $12,000, and then we need to pay 5% build deposit, and that's just going to be just over $20,000, nearly $21,000. So when you add all that up, that's just over $60,000, $61,000 and a bit. And that's nearly all the money that you would need to get this project started. What else you'd need is $5,500 to get the plans SDA certified, and then there'll be a valuation fee that the finance companies will make you pay for, and that's I suppose one of the little downsides of NDIS, because it's not a normal everyday residential loan or lease. It's a commercial lease, so we get charged commercial valuation rates on these things. So that can be $3,000 to $4,000 to get a valuation done. So the SDA fee, the valuation fee is close enough to another $10,000. So if somebody had about $70,000, access to $70,000, they can start this whole project off and running. To get it through to completion, you're going to need to be making repayments on the land while the house is getting built. And you're also going to need to be then making repayments as each stage of the house is built as well. So to get it through to completion before money hits your bank account, something like this is going to cost around $120,000, $130,000. So if you had access to that in your redraw account, we would not typically suggest using cash. We want to borrow as much money as we possibly can, because this is such a high income investment that you would typically need all the tax deductions you could possibly get with it. So therefore borrow as much as we can, and then you're sort of up and running. Everything that we have these days is to be completed in under 12 months, depending on, there you go. Whoops. So that's an explanation of the figures. So a bit over 70,000 and you're off and running. Many people have got access to $70,000 to start something like this going. And of course, once it's going, then, you know, you're going to work, you're earning money, and, you know, maybe you can be making the repayments as well. Sometimes the banks want us, depending on what your financial circumstances are and how much you're earning, Devang, might want to see that whole amount of whatever it might be, $130,000, that you do have access to it, that it is in a bank account, a regional facility somewhere. So they know that you can get through to completion, and they know, which is all they're concerned about, because they know that we'll have an income when it's all completed. And that's the typical sort of entry level high physical support house. Every one of them these days has their own bathroom, which is important. You don't want people in wheelchairs trying to share a bathroom at all. And then, of course, we've always got somewhere for an overnight a carer to be sleeping. That's where all the tablets get locked up and anything else gets locked up out of the way of the participants as well. OOA is on-site overnight assistance. Some people call it on-site overnight accommodation. We all know what they're talking about. And so, yeah, it doesn't need to be too fancy. The house needs to be indestructible though. And, you know, that's one reason why it costs a bit more than a normal everyday investment property to be getting built. I've touched on a couple of things there. Now, this house is a screaming bargain. It's out in Warragul, where there's not enough houses being built, and it's taken a while to get orders to go out there. So there needs to be a batch of half a dozen of them or so get built to make it worthwhile for the builders. But they're building normal homes out there as well. So we know that this one can get built, which is really good, because it's virtually impossible to find anything at this price point anymore. When we look at the build cost there, I pointed out it's an amazing bargain, around $400,000 for a high physical support house. Because if we look at what the government thinks the building costs are, then we can have a look at a high physical support house, run down the right-hand column to a house. I said we've always got on-site overnight accommodation. So a house that's got 2 participants in it, according to the experts at the NDIS, that's going to cost nearly $1.1 million to build. So if you guys can get it for just over $400,000, you are probably not going to have too many problems with valuations, and you are going to be making a lot of capital growth as well. When we talk about capital growth, because this is a commercial investment, the lease it's not a standard everyday. Let's have a look. What's the question, Frank?
Sorry, these prices including sprinkler system, or and sprinkler system is mandatory as well these days?
Yeah. So when I look at that price, I doubt if it includes a sprinkler system. And you would be well advised to get a sprinkler system in the house. And we probably wouldn't let you buy it these days without a sprinkler system, because the NDIS has also said that at some stage they'll be mandatory. Usually the sprinklers are anywhere from $30,000 to $60,000, somewhere in there, to get them done. So this is, and apologies for not knowing the answer, but by the time I work out what the answer is, the house is probably sold. So I'm presenting it to you, and it's a lesson that we're going to talk about. If there's anything that you're ever interested, you just send us an expression of interest to take it off the market. And then we can answer all the questions to your satisfaction. We can usually hold that property for 3 days to maybe a week as well. And, you know, then if it's satisfactory, you know, then we'll go ahead with it and get contracts ordered and go from there. So the reservation fee is anywhere from $1,000 to $2,500. It's fully refundable, and we need to have people's finance organised as well, to get all that done. So it would surprise, to answer the question, it would surprise me if it included sprinklers, because it's just amazing low price. But like I said, it only came in today, and it'll sell in a day or two.
Yeah, you just translate and tell him. I just don't know what the.
Sorry? I missed that. Dean, you can hear us okay, can you?
Yes, thanks.
All right. And did you have any burning questions as well?
No.
All righty. Fine. And how did you hear about us at Capital?
I picked it up off some advert somewhere.
All right.
So, sorry, probably Facebook. I don't know. Sorry.
Yeah, that's cool. I'm not sure if I've got your email address. That's all, because we record the presentations. Any proof that you want to see, any of the documents that I've drawn up, you know, the spreadsheets that you can play around with yourself, you know, we're happy to email them out to you at the end. So you can just text us or email us as well. We can get that sort of through to you too. Obviously, the expressions of interest as well. And when these properties become available, a lot of people would have seen the invitations that we send, because we just send them each week to our own database. But before we send them to the whole database, then we ring up the people that have got the expression of interest in. We know how much money they can spend. They've got their finance organised. They know which ownership structure is going to be purchasing the property. Because typically, if we just say, yes, I want that, and then you've got to speak to the accountant, then you've got to speak to your mortgage broker. The land agent sold the land on us because they don't care anything about us, NDIS, etc. So we do need to be organised before we get something reserved, because it's quite difficult to find land that is NDIS suitable. There's a whole lot of criteria for the land as well, but that's just one small fraction of it. You've got to find staff that can physically get to that location to look after people 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So if it's a new estate, there might not be any buses. They might be migrants to the country that, you know, their first job is wiping somebody's backside at 3 o'clock in the morning. So they're not going to be driving a car yet. So there's a whole, even things like the sprinkler system that Frank just mentioned, there's some places that cannot have a sprinkler system because they don't have enough water pressure in the estates or the areas. So everything might look fine, but if they can't have the sprinklers, we can't really put 2 high physical support people into that house, or even one, from a safety point of view. So very difficult to get appropriate land. You've also, then there's a whole lot of homework that needs to get done to make sure that density requirements are not breached, because, you know, you can't go and build 5 of these houses in the one street. Let's say that's too many bedrooms, too many participants, too close to each other. The point of NDIS is distributing people through the community. They merge, blend in, just become a normal part of the community instead of being locked away in one particular area as well. So if we looked at that house, for example, which was $704,000. Let me have a look. Put numlock on and try that again. I'll just give you an example of how we're manufacturing capital growth. Income was 163, something. And sorry guys. But what we've got here is, because the valuation of a commercial property is based on its income, we've got a couple of lenders that will allow you to refinance these things once they're the hard part is getting them built from a finance point of view, which is why we actually have to use mortgage brokers that we recommend. These days we we might consider it, but it would be very difficult to use your own mortgage broker and get this thing through promptly without you losing money or losing the property itself. So we're 99% sure that you're going to have to use our mortgage broker. There would have to be some really amazing reason why you would use your own existing mortgage broker. And that's just a conclusion that we've come to over nearly 5 years of getting this done and having people burn money by trying to use their existing mortgage broker who they've got a relationship and knows all their facts and figures. This is not a normal everyday residential investment. It's completely different. It's not a pure commercial investment either. And there's only one main source of funds to get these things built in the first place as well. So once it is built, based on that income of $163,000, the investor was happy to get a 10% return, then he would pay $1.6 million for that property that you paid $700,000 for. So there are banks that will value the properties that we have because we have a long lease, because we have major NDIS providers, because they have a history, and once the money starts going into the bank, if we refinance, then in regional areas like Warragul that we were talking about with this one, that house is valued at over $2 million. And if we could shift into the Melbourne metropolitan area or Sydney metro, then it's worth a bit more. So it's just a matter of how much somebody's prepared to, what sort of return they're prepared to accept. If this was a Coles supermarket, somebody might accept a 5% return, and therefore they might pay, over $3 million for that property. But being an NDIS, it's not quite as blue chip as a Coles supermarket or a BP service station that somebody might be happy to accept a lower rate of return on it. So it's valued at that. Pretty much any bank in Australia is going to give us a 60% loan on it, which means that we could redraw against that property up nearly $1 million. That means there's an extra $274,000 on top of the deposit that you get back that you put into that property as well. So this is where me and Devang come emailing you, knocking on your door, standing by your letterbox when you're trying to go to work in the morning to get you to buy another property, right? You've got the equity, you've got the cash flow, very, very easy for you to go and purchase another one next year, or once you've done your tax returns, or once the money's flowing in, depending on which finance company that we use. So that's quite an exciting part about NDIS. I've told people 100 times, so maybe I'm not too excited, but we've had customers that have refinanced their first property and bought 4 new ones once the first one was up and running. Thanks to the capital growth, thanks to the cash flow, and we're always telling people they can get 10 properties in 10 years. This really just supercharges all that as well. And the theory is pretty much the same in self-managed super funds as well. Might take a little bit longer, not too much. And in super, we might have to sell it off to get access to the money, but that's a consideration and a chat that we'd have with you once it's up and running as well. So does that all make sense? As to why we're manufacturing capital growth. So we're not waiting around for property to double every 7.2 years or 5 years if we pick a high capital growth area, like we always tried to do with normal everyday investment properties. Alrighty, guys. So we got the capital growth. Then, of course, people want to know about the cash flow. That's why it's quite attractive. The we can see how much the government's going to pay us if I share the appropriate spreadsheet, which is, this is the calculator, which comes off the NDIS website. We can only play around with drop-down boxes. So there's nothing that I can do to change the rent or the other, the end result. All I'm doing is picking drop-down boxes. So with this particular property, it's going to be built after 2023. We're only going to have 2 participants, 2 residents in there. We want high physical support house because we would never build an improved livability house these days. And we have not built one for about 4 years, because with a high physical support house, we can put in an improved livability person anyway, but not vice versa. We always need the on-site overnight assistance if we've got people with high needs. I didn't put the sprinklers in this one because I thought that price was too cheap. If it's got sprinklers in it, we actually get more money. So this is actually a good point. Without sprinklers, it's 70,823. But if we buy the sprinklers, it's gone up to 74 and a bit. So let's just say it's $3,500 extra. The sprinklers cost us, like we said, $30,000 to $60,000. We'd certainly want them to be closer to $30,000. And then it's taking us about 10 years to get our money back on it. And therefore, from a mathematical point of view, it's worthwhile doing. We would probably have to do it anyway. All right. But just for the returns, the calculation, I'm just going to leave them out because they might affect the price. I think Warragul's down in Gippsland somewhere. We can pick the right area anyway, and there's not much difference when we're getting out that way either. So that's $70,000 a room. On top of that, the tenant's got to pay a little bit of their pension, 25% of their pension, and the Commonwealth Government's also going to give you some money because they're a low-income earner, so they get rental assistance too. So that adds up to $163,000 a year for that property. And that's a 23% return. Usually there's about 3 or 4% worth of costs associated with it, things like insurance, things like rates, and the property management fee too. So we have, actually, I lied before, didn't I? So if we did have the sprinklers, then because there's 2 rooms, not just one, then the total income's $170,000 a year. So that's an extra $7,000 a year. So if the sprinklers cost you $30,000, in 5 years' time, you're making a profit. All right. If it cost you $60,000, then in 10 years' time, you're making a profit. So whichever way we slice it, it's worthwhile putting the sprinklers in from a financial investor point of view, and that's part of the carrot that the government is dangling at you to put the sprinklers in there as well from day one. So we would always do it. And some sorry?
One question while we are this additional cost of fittings that we're discussing. I just have one of a client had asked me. These are all tax depreciable, right? So
yeah, exactly.
That works. Okay.
Correct. Yeah, correct. So by the time you take that into account as well, we're well ahead for sure. Alrighty. So let's have a look here. And I mean, everybody's heard about NDIS these days, so we don't really have to, it's not all too good to be true. There's plenty of proof that what we talked about 4 years ago or so, 5 years ago we started doing this, is it's all actually worked out better than we were telling customers initially. So what I'll do now is I'll run through the standard presentation that's nearly 5 years old. It explains a little bit about NDIS. Actually, there's one more thing I want to do before I get onto that, sorry, which is, and I remember to do it because I've just gone and said to myself, it's all too good to be true. So a lot of our investors, when we first started talking to them, they would just say, it's too good to be true, it's too good to be true. Why would the government pay me $160,000 a year for a $700,000 house? You know, that's what you're paying in Tarneet these days. It's what you'd probably be lucky to get around Clyde, on the southeastern suburbs of Melbourne. Whereabouts are you based, Dean?
Sunny Coast.
Sunshine Coast?
Yep.
Okay, gotcha. You know, even land up there's, you know, $700,000. So the yeah, so people just couldn't believe it. They thought NDIS was going to go broke, and many reasons associated with that. So, but once they have a look at how much money the government's either making out of it, or how much they're saving, then they can see that you just got to follow the numbers and see that it's not going to get turned off and it's only going to get bigger and better. And that was also proven to us when good old Jim Chalmers did his budget announcements at the end of last year. They let everybody know that for every dollar that they spend on NDIS, they get 2.2 back into the economy. So it's one of the very few investments that I can see anywhere in the world where everybody involved in the whole investment is actually winning. So they're maybe not the taxpayer, okay, because they're paying for it. They're going to work every day and working away, paying tax to generate this. But, you know, if we're smart about it, we're going to be buying it and we're going to be then reaping the benefits of that. Because, you know, the participants get a fantastic new house that's custom built for them. Their families love you. They're the most grateful, happy people, you know, once they've got a decent accommodation for their loved ones to live in. The providers, the carers that look after these people have got a higher paying job than what a lot of them have ever had before, thanks to the amount of money that gets spent in NDIS on all carers. The NDIS providers make a fortune. You'll never see one of those driving around in an old car. Same as the SDA providers, the property managers. Us investors are making, you know, if we have a $700,000 property in Werribee, we're getting $500, $600 a week in the western suburbs of Melbourne, $30,000 a year if we're lucky. And these days, you know, there's pets, you know, scratching your walls out, you know, cats peeing all over your house and you can't get the tenants out. So the dealing with an NDIS house that's giving you over $3,000 a week, we're making 5 times the return for a whole lot less risk and an astronomically amount less headaches as well. So this is the answer to the too good to be true side of things that comes up with people. And, you know, when we started doing this nearly 5 years ago, we just heard it all the time. But about 6 months later, you know, people have been to a couple of the presentations that we've done. You know, they've heard about it in the news. Their friends have bought one. And it finally gets through their heads that it's not too good to be true and it all makes perfect sense. So when you think about how much money the government's making out of that, we just saw in that example in Warragul, there's $12,000 with stamp duty. GST on the build there is going to be, let's just change that, is going to be a bit under 40,000. We would say, just say 35 on this house. The it's going to take a year's worth of labour or work or time for everybody involved in a house. If you put their jobs sort of bit one after another, it's a bit more than that, but the PAYG tax associated with it is a fair bit more than that 1 year's worth of work. So government's making PAYG. Then for every house that we build, we're creating jobs for carers. Because it's 24-hour care required, one person requires 24-hour care, 3 8-hour shifts. That's three jobs. Nobody can work 7 days a week either. So that means there's a 4th person that's going to be required. And then, of course, there's 2 participants in that house, so that's 8. But then on top of that, you've got the bus driver that takes them around. You've got their plan managers that do all their administration for them, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So it's quite easily 10 people per house, or 10 jobs that are created for each house that you guys are building. And that's, wonderful for the economy. The government's making PAYG out of all that as well. So conservatively, or roughly, there's about $200,000 worth of PAYG. Then you're also going to be making it as an investor on the rent, and that's taxable income. So depending on whether you put in a family trust, your super fund, your own personal name, there's typically some sort of a tax to be paid. So the government will make some money there. And then you've got the NDIS provider who's giving us the lease. So if you think that the average house that they manage makes about $600,000 to $700,000 a year profit for them, so you understand why they want to give us a lease. Assuming they have the staff, assuming they can hire the staff, assuming they can train the staff, assuming they can manage the staff. So, even if you halve that profit, the average profit, at 25%, they're still paying the government $100,000 a year in tax as well. And that would mean that little $700,000 house that you just built has given the government about $400,000 in its pocket in the first year. Now, they're only giving you $160-something thousand back, so it's a pretty good deal from their part immediately. But on top of that, that person is not sitting in a hospital. They're not sitting in an aged care facility. They are now out in the community, which is good for them. And it's also very good for the government, because Bill Shorten said at the National Press Club conference, and when I'm referring to these things, we do have the proof, the copies, the videos, etc. So I don't expect you to believe a word I say at all. So all the proof for everything that we're going on here is readily available as well. So he says it saves $14,000 a year, a week to have somebody out of hospital and in the private system. So, if you added all that up, then, that's over $750,000 worth of year savings just to get people out of hospital too. So between the two of those things, the government's $1 million better off for each house that you guys build. And hence the giant rent that is dangled in front of your face as a giant carrot to get you investing in these NDIS properties. So does it, Devang, you can, actually other guys, can you tell me that, I assume that makes sense for you guys? It's clear when you just look at the figures?
Yes.
Does that require any further explanation at all? Les?
No.
No, okay. All right. This little presentation we did a while ago, I deliberately haven't updated it because it just shows that we were correct and things have worked out better than expected. As I said, don't believe a word I say. The need to use our mortgage brokers, as I was going through before. We just had a couple of examples in the last day where one guy lost $5,500. He just burned it. He started off using our mortgage broker, decided he liked his one better, swapped mortgage brokers. His mortgage broker didn't get him finance. So he'd gone and spent $5,500 on legal fees and setting up trust structures, which are now useless because he can't get finance. And that's sort of a common story, unfortunately, which is why I sort of warn people at the start. Everybody's got their own accountant. Usually they like them. They're not always, but we're happy to pay for a second opinion from one of our accountants who is familiar with the high income that these things generate and what you should be doing to minimise the amount of tax associated with that. Because usually you wouldn't just buy this in your own name and add it to your own personal income because nearly half of it's going to disappear in tax straight away. There may be better ownership structures like family trusts or unit trusts or company or other company structures, and even we would also tell you to seriously consider super. If you had enough deposit to get one in super, then that would be a fantastic investment. We don't use conveyors, we use lawyers because it's not straightforward, and the lawyer works in your best interest. The conveyor just ticks a few boxes. If you're over your sort of mid-40s, in your 50s, you really should be talking to the financial planner about how you can get enough deposit in your super fund to get one of these things, because if you're over 60 and not working full time, then all the income that comes in may be tax-free, no tax, and also no capital gains tax as well. So that's definitely worthwhile considering. NDIS has been around a little while. They started talking about it way back around 2008 or so. It became an election promise of the Labor government, and so when they got in 2016, it came into law, but it took a couple of years to get everything going. So when the NDIS came into law, they actually had to create the law. That took a little while. Then they had to hire all the public servants to implement it and to write up all the documentations and document it. So that took a couple of years. So we're sort of getting up to about 2018. We're keeping our eye on it. 2018, we seriously started telling builders about it, going into different areas to see what the demand was from the local NDIS providers, telling them that if they would give us a lease, we would get a house built for them. And then the banks were pretty good with it. We could, just typically go to any bank and get finance, and then all of a sudden the banks got really confused with it. Is it commercial? Is it residential? Well, it's sort of neither, because it's a residential house in a residential street with a commercial lease. So then the big four banks and other banks would not deal with it. So that slowed everything down again. There was a finance company set up specifically to do construction for NDIS. So that was fantastic. So then it was full steam ahead again. And then COVID came along and just screwed us all over enormously. So there's been some stops and starts. We're pretty much through all the COVID period now, and the houses that we talk to you about these days are being built in under 12 months. Or actually, you'd be expecting money to be going into your bank account in under 12 months. And if you did something today, you'd probably have money in your bank account by Christmas, depending on which house it is. And we're usually only selling titled land, so we don't fall into some of the disasters that happened during COVID as well. But I'll give you a look at a house that is high physical support, and you can then work out why it costs a whole lot more than a normal everyday house. Hang on. Share this. And Devam, just tell me if you can see it and hear it.
Disability accommodation is as a participant who really wants to progress the ideas of specialist disability accommodation and how important it is to support a person's life with high level complex needs and how that can actually make such a difference. And I really want to explore this more to actually then be able to showcase to other people what might work and how they can live and do things that they never.
Yeah, so we can see this is a high physical support bathroom. The walls need to be reinforced so that it can take hoists and joists to get people out of their wheelchair into the bath, onto the toilet, sometimes into bed, out of bed as well. And of course, all this extra tax depreciable fixtures and fittings in there.
Never thought they could do.
We've basically started to talk to the market to be able to say, here is this new segment and it's disability housing. We need to be able to look at it differently to the way we construct today. It's not a rock.
When we're dealing with different NDIS providers, they've all got their own theory as to what needs to go into the house, and we build whatever they say they need built. So there's a basic NDIS standard which anybody can build. Virtually every single one of the houses that we have is well above the minimum NDIS specification because that particular NDIS provider needs the house in a certain way. Remembering that they, some of these people have 600 staff, 1,200 staff, and so everything needs to be the same in every single one of their houses. So the staff can find things. The procedures are all the same, not different for each different physical house. Here inside the high physical support house, we can see huge handles, huge doorways, huge bathroom, huge passageway. Front door will be enormous as well. There's cameras up there and technology. The left-hand side door there. There may be facial recognition. There may be automatic doors, all that sort of thing, because some of these people can't use their arms, limbs, or voices. And you'll see,
it is just good design.
You'll also see all the way through to this house out to the footpath, no step at all. No lip in the bathroom there on the right, no step. Front door out past the mailbox, down the driveway onto the footpath. Which is also makes, land a little bit harder to come by, or a lot harder to come by, to meet that criteria for these houses as well.
Once we sit down with the person, the occupational therapist, the care team, I get an understanding of what the house and home needs to look like. Part of the projects that I've also run is things as understanding what home for life means. So as people age, the need changes.
That's a really good point too. So before I said you might have a lease for 40 years, you might actually end up leasing it for longer. So NDIS used to only go to 65 years old, and then when somebody was 65, they got put into the aged care system. So, they may have been, who knows, because NDIS hasn't been around that long. They would have got moved out of the house and put in an aged care facility, which is not ideal. Aged care has difficulty looking after aged people rather than people with a disability on top of that. So a lot better that they stay in a house like this that's been custom designed for them with everything that they need in the area where they want to live. So the government's recently changed the fact that they don't get kicked out when they hit age 65. We just continue to get paid the same amount of rent as what we always have until they do move out of that house one way or another. So that's fantastic news for us, because some people were concerned what would happen, when their participants reach 65, then you've got to find somebody else, but not relevant anymore. So that's another one of the examples where NDIS has ended up being better than what we first thought it was going to be as well. So one of the NDIS providers gives us 10-year lease and 6 5-year options. That's fantastic. The typical lease is 10 years and 2 5-year options. So 20-year leases, but now those people could stay in that house effectively ad infinitum.
So you try and make the design for future proofing. I also find by going and meeting the client and their families in their own home, it gives me an understanding of what is actually needed for the person that we're building this for.
Specialist disability accommodation is...
You saw the lighting on the floor. That's an improved livability house, sort of entry-level house. Just enables people with partial blindness or even low IQ to be able to move around the house easily as well.
Really important to me as central to the NDIS because it allows a person to have that chance to have a home, a space, be part of the community and celebrate what they really need to make that life come alive.
Yeah, so that's just an overview. Why it's going to cost a bit more, and depending on the area, depending on the NDIS provider, it might be costing us twice as much as a normal everyday investment property. When we started this, way back 2018 or so, we were a bit terrified that there wasn't going to be the demand. So our first few customers, took a bit of a punt and prayed. But when the government started talking about it, they said that there'd be 28,000 people that would require accommodation. But by the time we got to 2020, even before COVID, they worked out that there was actually 122,000 people that needed accommodation. So we know that there's a demand there. Will the waiting list ever go down? So unfortunately not, and there's quite a few reasons for that. There's many reasons for that. And we can see that the amount of money that the government's spending on NDIS proves that as well, because I think 2 years ago they were spending less on NDIS than Medicare, which was about $23 billion a year. This year they're spending $32 billion, and by 2032 estimated $115 billion. So as an investor, you really want to be putting your hand out to be getting a share of that income, and the sooner you do it, the sooner somebody's in your house, they're not moving out. There's only a limited number of people with a disability in any particular area. So when they're in your house, good luck to you. You got your 20 years worth of income coming in. So then COVID came along, and COVID stuck a rocket up the backside of NDIS investment, because everybody that was sitting around in an aged care facility that was under 65 got moved out, and everybody that was in hospital that wasn't meant to be there also got moved out as well. So obviously there was no travel for that period of time, so there were plenty of vacant hotels. So those people got put into hotels effectively, and the government hired a whole lot more staff, printed a whole lot more money, or however they did it, and got that money paid into NDIS, and recently have increased the rent as well to motivate us all to invest it into it. So we just assumed that when the Liberal government got in that they were going to turn this off, because they like to very often reduce costs. The Labor government likes to spend, roughly. But when the Liberals got in, they actually increased the funding for NDIS. So we thought, that's wonderful. Maybe we will, continue to recommend it. And it's just obviously boomed since then. Everybody knows about NDIS these days. It's in the news. It's on four corners. And it's going from strength to strength. And you would be hard pressed to hear any complaints. The only complaints you hear about is the odd tradie here or there that's overcharged. But in a lot of cases, if you actually look at what's required of that tradesperson, they're not overcharging because they need to be NDIS accredited. They need to go through training. They need to pay extra money to do that. So in the vast majority of cases, yes, it's expensive. Yes, it's justified as well. So, we've already touched on the fact that, let's say when we did this presentation 4 or 5 years ago, that's how much it was costing to keep somebody in hospital. Now it's about $750,000 per year. And so, you're with 2 participants in your house, which is what virtually every one of our houses has, you're saving the government $1.5 million a year as well. So they're not going to turn it off. Okay, we don't have to worry about that at all anymore. And if you sign up today anyway, you've signed up under today's legislation, and that federal government NDIS legislation says you're getting paid today's rent plus inflation for the next 20 years. So, maybe you can start worrying about what's going to happen in 20 years, but you don't have to worry too much. It's a good little video. It's not really relevant these days. It was done sort of in the middle of COVID days, and it just proved that the government got themselves organised, splashed enormous amount of money into NDIS, just paid what needed to be paid, and then they audited people later. So very strict with the auditing. So there's no mucking around in NDIS. I was even traveling with one of the NDIS providers, and he wouldn't even buy a drink when we were traveling at the airport on the NDIS company's card because it could be argued that that was a personal expense because he was drinking it. But he was traveling for business. So every other business person in Australia is going to claim that as traveling accommodation expenses. He would not even put a $3.50 juice on that credit card. That's how tight they are. That's how straight up and down they are with their expenses on it, which is wonderful. Once upon a time, how do you work out which area you want to invest in? So we used to spend a fortune on Dimphner Boholt's courses. We used to buy every report that came out of Terry Ryder. We'd read all the ANZ Bank reports, Bernard Salt demographer, all these reports to work out what areas were growing, what were going to have great capital growth. All completely irrelevant, huge waste of money these days. All we need to know is where the NDIS provider has participants and that where those participants want to live. And then if we get a lease, we're home and hosed. So when we started this, and you can still do it today, this is a demand map. You can click on this, put in a postcode, have a look at what the demand is in a particular area, and you can actually see whether that demand is increasing. And if so, that would be an area you want to invest in, or if the demand is decreasing, and if so, that you would not invest in that area. So that's all the homework that we had to do to start off with. And then once we saw what the demand was in an area, we would drive to that area. We would we'd just go up and down every street, go through the phone book, go to every one of the NDIS providers and ask them to give us a lease and how many participants they had. We don't need to do that because over the years of dealing with these NDIS providers, they will tell us they need, 3 houses here, 6 houses there, 2 over there, and then we'll have a look to see what sort of rent's on offer and what, if any of our investors are interested. And a lot of times, we wouldn't even recommend them as well, because the more money that you make, the faster you'll be able to come back and buy another property from us, and we'll get paid again. So we are not charging you any money to put together the leases, to make sure they've got staff, to have a look at the different areas at all. We're just assuming that you're going to give us some referrals, which our customers do, and that you're going to buy another one next year and we'll get paid again next year. So we don't need to worry about charging you anywhere from $15,000 to $60,000 to put all this together like other marketing companies do. Home for Life, you heard that talked about in the presentation. So, and that's what I've said to you before, hurry up and build one, because once people are in there, they're not really moving. You've got 20 years of income, and all you got to worry about is how you're going to spend the money. The 4 different categories we talked about: physical support, and we would build that because then we can put a fully accessible person in there. That's somebody that's in a wheelchair, but they can look after themselves typically. And the improved livability person, they can typically look after themselves in a lot of cases as well. But the rent for a high physical support person might be 80,000. Fully accessible might be 75, and improved livability might be 70. But these days, there's not a big difference between it. Last financial year, high physical support person got twice as much rent per room, obviously, as an improved livability person. So no improved livability got built, no fully accessible typically got built. But now the rent's so close, none of our investors really care whether they've got $70,000 a room or $85,000 a room. They're not really that greedy. So that's and it makes it easy to fill your house as well and to get a really good income out of it. The robust category is, you'll see properties come through from us where the income is over $5,000 a week, for properties starting $800,000, $850,000. And that's because it's not just the rent that you're getting a share of all the income that property generates. So that's a fantastic investment. And it's only come about because one of my business partners went off to the biggest NDIS provider for robust category people and said, nobody's building a house for you, because usually you can only put one of these people into a house, because these might be the people with behavioural problems, mental issues, bad behaviour, etc. And so no investor wanted somebody with bad behaviour running around their house. They just assumed they were going to wreck the house. Normal tenants are bad enough, let alone somebody that's, crazy. So 2 things there. So we got a deal out of the NDIS provider that we get more than just rent. We get a share of all the profit that house generates. And the NDIS provider doesn't really care too much about the money. Their focus and why they're in that business is to look after people with a disability. So money's sort of secondary to them as well. That's fantastic for our investors. That means that we're getting 25, 30% returns on a lot of the properties that, you can invest into. A little bit more technical, but, worth it for $5,000 a week, that's for sure. When we started out, cost twice as much, let's say, to build one of these houses. Yeah, you needed a little bit more money, but at the start of this presentation, that's changed thanks to more sort of liberal financing, more established proof of concept, and that things are working these days, and some volume purchasing through some builders. So and of course the government knows that, and that's why you're getting paid so much more rent. And I showed you before, the government said, that high physical support house would cost $1.1 million to build. The rent is based on $1.1 million plus land, not based on $400,000, $450,000 worth of house. So it's definitely worthwhile taking advantage of, that's for sure. It used to take twice as long to build these houses as a normal everyday investment property. So you needed more money in your bank, more in your offset account to get it through to completion. But these days, I already mentioned, one of the builders is building all these houses in 4.5 months. So you've got to add a bit at the front to get your finance organised and to get the council approval, maybe 2 months to get through council. But, that's 6.5, 7 months. Another month for somebody to move in once it's completed, because there's a few things that have to happen before anybody can move in, but not very long at all. And virtually everything is happening under 12 months. And the NDIS providers that we use also limit the builders to only building 100 houses in each state, so that way they don't get overcommitted. They don't go broke like other builders. Normal residential builders have gone broke by just, having salespeople just sell, and knowing that they're never going to be able to have enough tradies to get all that done. And the NDIS providers are really strict on this, because when somebody gets finance approval to have their accommodation paid for, that expires after 12 months. So if the house is not ready in 12 months, you now don't have anybody to move into that house. So that's why the NDIS providers have made sure it's going to be built in 12 months, because if they have to apply for finance again, that can take 6 to 12 months to get the finance reapproved. So very, very strict with the builders and their limitations, which is also another reason for us to hurry up too, because when we started doing the profit share properties, we started taking orders in September, and by the middle of December, the builder could not build any more houses. Luckily, we reset in January, but it certainly won't take too long for them to hit their 100 in each state as well. You might be worried about having participants. Not as worried as what I was, having dozens of customers with empty houses wanting to stab me for letting them know about it. They're completely not an issue these days, because we're dealing with the NDIS providers who have the participants from day one, which is why we get a lease from day one. So we don't actually have to worry about the participants at all. Already touched on the calculations and explained all that. The person that's living in the house, they pay 25% of their pension. Pension's gone up a little bit, and the Commonwealth Government also pays you rental assistance too. So that's the reasonable rental contribution, which is extra income that you get on top of the rent. It's shown in the calculator before, and this year it's about $11,000 on top of the rent that you see as well. So there's 3 sources of income for the NDIS. We can do cash flow analysis for you once we know what the interest rate we'll get from your mortgage broker, what the rates are going to be in the area, any other costs, the depreciation. We can work all that out for you as well to tell you exactly how much money is going to be going into your bank account based on worst case scenario, based on best case scenario too. Happy to do all that for you as well. But we would deal with multiple NDIS providers. They all have different leases. Some of them will guarantee you a return. So if you were 75 years old and just wanted to make sure you had enough money to sit at the beach all day and pay all your bills, maybe you would consider a lease where it's guaranteed for 10 years at $65,000 a year. Still twice as much as a normal investment property for the same price. So that's pretty good. Otherwise, you might just go for as much money as possible, or if you're not too greedy, somewhere in between as well. So we can give you the pros and cons of each of the different options from each of the different NDIS providers, once we worked out what sort of money you can borrow and what you're most interested in as well. So yes, it can be guaranteed. Virtually everything that we were doing had a rental guarantee in it. That's been removed from some of them in the last couple of weeks because a couple of these NDIS providers are going to be listing on the stock exchange. So the greedy little stock market buddies have said there's no rental guarantees anymore because that's contingent liability, which is going to reduce the value of your shares. Nothing's changed with the NDIS providers or their demand. It's just changed with the stockbrokers. So people that got in early, some of them had $52,000 a year rental guarantees. That's twice as much as what the rent was for the equivalent price property as well. So that's their worst case scenario. is 20 years of $52,000 a year. That's $1 million guaranteed. You know, for a $700,000 property was pretty good. Alrighty. And then there's, you know, like we said, I haven't asked too many questions of you guys at all. But once we know, you know, goals, priorities, you know, what you're most interested in, you know, what you're scared of, we can make the appropriate recommendations as well. And, you know, then there's the links for a lot of that information as well. So, any questions? Let me know if there's anything else that we need to send out to you or you want proof of, and we will go from there. Alrighty. I'm sorry, the panel's disappeared with all you guys. All right, last chance for questions. All right, all done, guys. We've recorded it, so if you did want to have a copy, just let us know. All right, thanks very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Anytime, or every Monday, 7:30 Melbourne time. All right, see you guys.
Absolutely. Thank you.